They called it the Golden Age of Hollywood, a dream factory crafting not just films, but mythologies. From the 1920s through the 1960s, studios transformed ordinary people into luminous icons, their faces 50 feet tall on silver screens across America. The public devoured their performances, their romances, their carefully constructed personas, all meticulously managed by powerful studio systems. But Hollywood's glittering facade often concealed troubling realities. The very machinery that created these stars also enabled and protected them when their behavior crossed ethical and legal boundaries. Today we examine iconic actors whose alleged misdeeds and controversial behavior reveal the complex shadow beneath Hollywood's golden spotlight. This isn't about canceling legends or diminishing artistic achievements. Rather, it's an exploration of how power, fame, and institutional protection created environments where accountability often vanished as quickly as yesterday's marquee. Before diving into individual stories, we need to understand the ecosystem that shaped these stars, the almighty studio system. From the 1920s through the 1950s, a handful of studios controlled virtually every aspect of filmmaking. MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and others didn't just make movies. They manufactured stars through ironclad 7-year contracts. As historian David Thompson notes, the studios operated like factories, with performers as products to be shaped, maintained, and protected at all costs. Studios employed fixers like MGM's Eddie Mannix, whose job included suppressing scandals, paying off witnesses, and manipulating press coverage. When major stars misbehaved, the machine sprang into action, bribing police, pressuring victims, and burying stories before they reached the public. Adding another layer of control was the Hays Production Code of 1930, which governed not just film content, but star behavior. To maintain the illusion of moral purity, studios demanded their actors project wholesome images in public, regardless of their private conduct. This context is crucial for understanding how many of the following stories remained hidden for decades, only emerging years later through memoirs, investigative reporting, or deathbed confessions.
You had a reputation as a real horse's behind in this town. A very difficult guy for years. Why? Where did that all come from, Kirk?
It shows you what a good actor I am, because I really am the sweetest.
Come on. Everybody says that in the old days you were an exceedingly... Even your own kids said that you were very difficult.
They didn't say I was a horse's ass, did they?
No, they did not.
Kirk Douglas embodied masculine heroism, rising from poverty as the son of Jewish immigrants to become one of Hollywood's most compelling leading men. His performances in films like Spartacus and Champion showcased both physical prowess and emotional vulnerability. Douglas earned significant respect for helping to break the Hollywood blacklist by publicly crediting blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo for Spartacus in 1960. Yet persistent rumors have shadowed Douglas's legacy. The most serious allegation involves actress Natalie Wood, who was a teenage performer when she reportedly met Douglas. According to multiple Hollywood insiders, including Wood's sister Lana Wood, Natalie emerged from a hotel meeting with Douglas traumatized. In her 2021 memoir, Lana claimed, "Natalie looked awful. She was very disheveled and very upset. She told me that he hurt her." It's important to note that Kirk Douglas consistently denied any misconduct throughout his life, and no formal accusations were ever filed. Many colleagues praised his professionalism and integrity, including director Stanley Kubrick, who, despite their creative differences, acknowledged Douglas's commitment to quality filmmaking. The contrast between public heroism and private allegations reflects a common duality in Hollywood. As film historian Janine Bassinger observes, studios created such powerful mythologies around stars that the public often couldn't reconcile negative information with the images they'd embraced. Douglas himself acknowledged some personal failings in his 1988 autobiography, admitting to affairs and a sometimes volcanic temper. He wrote candidly, "I'm probably the most disliked actor in Hollywood, and I feel pretty good about it. I was born aggressive, and I guess I'll die aggressive." Whether the more serious allegations are true may never be conclusively established. Douglas died in 2020 at age 103, and Wood tragically drowned in 1981. What remains clear is how effectively the studio system could shield its valuable stars from scrutiny, a protection that extended well beyond their careers.
For years, I suffered silently. I didn't want to tell anybody. I couldn't muster the courage. And you have to have courage to, I need help. And I knew I needed it.
Few stars embodied youthful American optimism like Mickey Rooney. Standing just 5 feet 2 inches, Rooney became Hollywood's biggest box office draw in the late 1930s through his Andy Hardy series and musical collaborations with Judy Garland. His boundless energy and boyish charm made him the perfect symbol of all-American innocence. The reality, according to many accounts, contrasted sharply with this persona. Rooney's personal life was tumultuous, marked by 8 marriages, gambling debts, and alleged predatory behavior toward young actresses. As his Boys Town co-star Spencer Tracy reportedly observed, "The problem with Mickey is he confuses his life with the parts he plays. He never grew up." Elizabeth Taylor, who worked with Rooney on National Velvet when she was just 12, later described uncomfortable encounters with him on set. According to several biographers, Rooney would make inappropriate comments and attempt to spend time alone with Taylor, behavior the studio actively discouraged but never formally addressed. Ava Gardner, Rooney's first wife, offered insight into his contradictions in her autobiography. Mickey could be charming, talented, and generous. He could also be self-absorbed and vindictive when he didn't get his way. Their marriage, which began when Gardner was just 19, quickly deteriorated due to what she described as his controlling behavior and infidelity. Film historian Leonard Maltin notes, Rooney grew up in an environment where boundaries didn't exist. He was working from age 2, surrounded by adults who treated him alternately as a meal ticket and a miniature adult. The results were predictably problematic. While many of Rooney's contemporaries described him as difficult and egotistical, others emphasized his genuine talent and occasional kindness. Director Clarence Brown recalled, when Mickey was focused on work, his generosity could be remarkable. Between takes was another matter entirely. Rooney himself acknowledged some regrets late in life, writing in his 1991 autobiography, "I was a 14-year-old with the emotions of a 7-year-old and the income of a 50-year-old. This unusual combination, created by a studio system that infantilized yet sexualized its younger stars, produced the complex figure whose legacy remains contested today."
Well, first of all, I'm stage struck, and I think they all know that. Secondly, I try to get a film that has audience identification.
Joan Crawford's transformation from dance hall girl to Oscar-winning actress represented the ultimate Hollywood reinvention. Over 40 years, she evolved from silent film flapper to dramatic powerhouse in classics like Mildred Pierce. Her rigorous work ethic and striking screen presence earned both audience adoration and industry respect. This carefully constructed image shattered in 1978 when her adopted daughter Christina published Mommy Dearest, a memoir detailing alleged abuse that became an immediate sensation. Christina described a mother prone to alcoholic rages, writing, "She'd wake me in the middle of the night by slapping my face or beating me with a hairbrush. Once I truly believed she was going to kill me." The infamous wire hanger episode, where Crawford allegedly flew into a rage over Christina's use of wire hangers for her clothes, became a cultural touchstone, later dramatized in the 1981 film adaptation starring Faye Dunaway. These allegations deeply divided Hollywood. Crawford's friends, including actresses Myrna Loy and Marlene Dietrich, vehemently defended her. Director George Cukor stated, "Joan was demanding and difficult, certainly, but the monster described in that book, I never saw that person." Crawford's other adopted children presented contradictory accounts. Her twin daughters, Kathy and Cindy, disputed Christina's portrayal, with Kathy commenting, "Our mother was strict, sometimes overly so, but never abusive in the way Christina claims." However, her son Christopher largely supported Christina's account. Biographer Donald Spoto suggests the truth likely lies somewhere in between. Crawford was raised in poverty and abuse herself. She was determined her children would have discipline and advantages, but her methods reflected her own damaged upbringing. What's undeniable is how Crawford's public and private personas differed dramatically. MGM publicity materials portrayed her as the ideal mother, arranging photo spreads of Crawford and her children in pristine settings. Meanwhile, according to multiple sources, she struggled with alcoholism and perfectionism that sometimes manifested in controlling behavior. This dichotomy between carefully managed public image and private reality epitomizes Hollywood's golden age, where studios created mythologies so powerful that even those living them sometimes struggled to separate fact from fiction.
On the contrary, an observer and a correspondent. I'm awfully sorry, by the way, gentlemen, if there are any newspaper people here. If they'll stay out of my racket, I'll stay out of theirs. You know?
No actor epitomized dashing heroism more completely than Errol Flynn. His performances in Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood defined the swashbuckling genre. With his athletic build, charming accent, and magnetic presence, Flynn embodied romantic adventure for millions of moviegoers. Behind this heroic facade lay a complicated man whose private behavior generated serious legal consequences. In 1942, Flynn faced charges of statutory rape involving two teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley. The highly publicized trial revealed Flynn's penchant for young women and wild parties aboard his yacht, the Sirocco. Flynn was ultimately acquitted, but the case revealed troubling patterns. Journalist William Donati, who researched the trial extensively, wrote, "The studio spent enormous sums on Flynn's defense, hiring private investigators to discredit witnesses and influencing coverage in friendly newspapers." The phrase, "in like Flynn," entered the American lexicon, supposedly referencing his sexual conquests and ability to charm his way out of trouble. Hollywood columnist Ezra Goodman observed, "The studios turned Flynn's predatory reputation into a marketing angle. His bad boy image actually increased his box office appeal." Not all accounts of Flynn were negative. Director Michael Curtis, despite famous on-set conflicts with the actor, acknowledged Flynn had demons, certainly, but he also had genuine talent and, when sober, could be incredibly professional and generous. Co-star Olivia de Havilland, who starred in 8 films with Flynn, maintained a lifelong affection for him, despite acknowledging his flaws. Flynn's autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, published posthumously in 1959, revealed surprising self-awareness. He wrote, "I've had a hell of a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. All the adverse publicity has been a help rather than a hindrance." This candid assessment reflects the unusual reality of Golden Age Hollywood, where scandal could be transformed into marketable mystique through careful studio manipulation. When Flynn died in 1959 at just 50, the coroner's report indicated his body showed the wear of a man 20 years older. The swashbuckling hero, who never aged on screen, had, in reality, lived several intense lifetimes in his short years, leaving behind both cinematic treasures and troubling questions about fame's dark privileges.
Here, you tell me who it is or I'll break every bone in your
I won't. You
body.
can kill me and I won't.
Wallace Beery specialized in playing lovable roughnecks with hearts of gold. His Oscar-winning performance in The Champ alongside child actor Jackie Cooper cemented his image as a gruff but tender-hearted father figure. MGM marketed him as the gentle giant of the screen, an everyman audiences could trust. This carefully crafted image contrasted sharply with accounts from those who worked with him. Director King Vidor recalled, "Beery was perhaps the most hated man in Hollywood. His reputation for deliberate cruelty, especially toward child actors, was widespread in the industry." Jackie Cooper, who worked closely with Beery as a child, wrote in his autobiography, "Wallace terrorized me throughout filming. To make me cry on camera, he told me they'd shot my dog. When I broke down, they got their scene." Cooper added that Beery would deliberately step on his feet between takes and sabotage his performances when Beery felt upstaged. Mickey Rooney similarly described physical intimidation from Beery during their work together, though Rooney's account was more nuanced. "Beery could be a monster on set, but he taught me things about screen acting I never forgot. It was complicated, like being taught by a brilliant, abusive coach." The most disturbing allegations came from Gloria Swanson, who worked with Beery in her early career. In her autobiography, Swanson claimed Beery deliberately got her pregnant during filming in 1917, then forced her to have an illegal abortion that rendered her infertile. She wrote, He was a man totally without conscience where women were concerned. Not everyone's experience with Beery was negative. Character actor Lewis Stone defended him, stating, "Wallace could be difficult, certainly, but much of his gruffness was an act. Off camera, I often found him thoughtful and professional." Similarly, Marie Dressler, who co-starred with Beery in several films, described him as challenging but ultimately fair. Film historian Scott Amon suggests Beery's contradictions stemmed from his own difficult background. Raised in poverty and trained in a brutal circus environment, Beery knew only one way to succeed: through intimidation and control. The studio system, which valued results over methods, enabled his worst tendencies. Beery died in 1949, his reputation among colleagues already solidified as one of Hollywood's most difficult stars. Yet to the public, who only knew his screen persona, he remained the lovable curmudgeon with the heart of gold. Another testament to the studio system's power to separate image from reality.
Well, you just accumulate more problems, Jim. First, I must tell you that the estimates of my worth are grossly exaggerated, fantastically exaggerated. But that's true, I guess. When they go into figures, they always take it on the high side. And it hasn't, it's given me many more problems than I ever thought that I would acquire if I ever became affluent.
Bing Crosby's smooth baritone voice and relaxed charm made him one of America's most beloved entertainers. His recording of White Christmas remains the best-selling single of all time. On screen and radio, Crosby projected warmth, humor, and paternal wisdom that seemed to embody mid-century American values. This public persona faced significant challenge in 1983 when his eldest son, Gary, published Going My Own Way, a memoir depicting Bing as a cold, emotionally distant father who employed harsh physical discipline. Gary wrote, "He was not the good-humored, easygoing, golf-playing, horse-loving regular guy the public thought he was. He beat the hell out of us." Gary described regular weigh-ins, where the Crosby children were measured against strict weight charts. Falling short meant physical punishment with a special leather-covered cane. He claimed his father justified this approach by saying, "I'm going to make damn sure you don't grow up to be spoiled Hollywood brats." Bing's other children presented a more complex picture. His second family, from his marriage to actress Katharine Grant, described a much warmer father. His son, Nathaniel Crosby, wrote, "Dad learned from his mistakes with his first family. With us, he was present, engaged, and loving, though still very much a disciplinarian." Music historians note that Crosby's approach to parenting reflected both his Catholic upbringing and the parenting standards of his generation. Author Gary Giddens, who wrote a comprehensive Crosby biography, observed, "Bing was raised with strict discipline, and corporal punishment was the norm in the 1940s and 50s. This doesn't excuse excessive behavior, but it provides context." Katharine Crosby defended her late husband against Gary's allegations, stating, "Bing was a disciplinarian, as were many fathers of that generation, but he loved his children deeply and wanted only the best for them." She suggested Gary's account was colored by his own struggles with alcoholism and difficult relationship with his father. The contrasting accounts from Crosby's two families suggest a man who evolved over time, perhaps recognizing his earlier parenting mistakes. It also reveals how thoroughly the public accepted the persona Crosby presented in his films and music, making allegations of private harshness all the more shocking when they emerged after his death in 1977.
Many comebacks must have been, let me see, I think working at the Palladium Theatre in London for the first time was my best thrill.
And that was probably
and then
a command
the
performance.
Palace after that.
While our focus has primarily been on actors who allegedly mistreated others, it's important to examine how the studio system itself could be the villain. No story better illustrates this than Judy Garland's, the supremely talented performer whose voice captivated millions, but whose life was controlled and ultimately damaged by MGM. Signed to MGM at 13, Garland was immediately subjected to the studio's brutal star-making process. Louis B. Mayer and other executives regularly criticized her weight and appearance, provided pep pills for morning energy and sleeping pills for night, beginning an addiction that would plague her throughout her life. Garland's daughter, Liza Minnelli, has stated, "My mother was a victim of the studio system. They worked her 18 hours a day, drugged her to keep her weight down, and essentially stole her childhood." Studio records confirm that during The Wizard of Oz filming, Garland was limited to chicken soup, coffee, and 80, but nobody dared challenge the studio. "We were property, not people." Director Vincente Minnelli, who later married Garland, described MGM's film historian David Thompson notes, "Judy Garland's tragic life stands as the clearest indictment of Hollywood's golden age, the dark side of the dream factory." This segment reminds us that in examining Hollywood's troubled history, we must consider not just individual behavior, but the system that enabled, and often encouraged, exploitation of vulnerable performers in pursuit of profit and prestige.
But that's why it lasts, because it's in the files, and it's part of the legend, and it's not so. We couldn't be more friendly, happier together. I couldn't be more proud. I'm proud. I'm in awe.
Really?
I'm in awe of both of them.
Henry Fonda's screen persona embodied American integrity. In classics like The Grapes of Wrath and 12 Angry Men, he played principled men fighting for justice and truth. These roles resonated so deeply that the line between Fonda and his characters blurred in public perception. Behind this noble image was a more complex man, particularly regarding his family relationships. His daughter, Jane Fonda, has spoken candidly about her father's emotional distance. "He was unable to tell me he loved me. He couldn't express emotion except when he was acting." In her autobiography, she described seeking her father's approval her entire life, rarely receiving it. Henry's son Peter echoed these sentiments, stating in interviews, "Dad was remote, unavailable emotionally. He could play warmth on screen, but struggled to show it at home." Peter recalled learning of his mother from a newspaper because his father couldn't bring himself to tell the children directly. Henry's romantic life was equally complicated. Married 5 times, he frequently moved between relationships with minimal transition. His third wife, Susan Blanchard, later recalled, "Henry compartmentalized everything. When he ended a relationship, it was as if it had never existed." Actor Jimmy Stewart, Fonda's longtime friend, offered perspective. "Hank struggled with emotion off screen. The irony was that he could access tremendous feeling in his work, but in life, he built walls." Director John Ford, who worked closely with Fonda, similarly noted, "Henry puts everything he can't express in life into his performances." It's important to note that Fonda's emotional limitations don't place him in the same category as those accused of abuse or predatory behavior. Rather, his story illustrates how Golden Age actors often created public personas that masked or compensated for private limitations. Later in life, Henry and Jane Fonda experienced a partial reconciliation while working together on Golden Pond. Jane later described this as a gift, being able to tell him through the characters what we couldn't say directly to each other. This final collaboration, which won Henry his only Oscar shortly before his death, offered a poignant conclusion to a complicated father-daughter relationship. As we conclude our journey through the shadows of Hollywood's golden age, we're left with complex questions about art, accountability, and how we engage with troubled legacies. These 10 stories, from Kirk Douglas to Henry Fonda, Judy Garland to Bing Crosby, reveal the multi-layered nature of fame during Hollywood's formative era. Some used their power to harm others, some were victims of the system themselves, and many embodied both realities simultaneously. What lessons can we draw from these complicated histories? Perhaps most importantly, that institutional power without accountability creates environments where abuse flourishes. The studio system, for all its artistic achievements, prioritized profit and mythology over human welfare, a pattern that continues to resonate in conversations about power in entertainment today. These stories also remind us to approach celebrity worship with healthy skepticism. The gap between carefully constructed public personas and private realities has always existed in Hollywood, though social media and greater transparency have narrowed this divide in modern times. Yet acknowledging these darker chapters doesn't negate genuine artistic achievements. Films like Spartacus, The Wizard of Oz, and The Grapes of Wrath remain powerful cultural touchstones, even as we reckon with troubling allegations about those who created them. Film historian David Thompson perhaps best captures this tension. Great art sometimes comes from deeply flawed people working within problematic systems. The challenge isn't to erase this history, but to engage with it honestly, celebrating achievements while acknowledging the human costs that often accompanied them.